Hi, this is a recording to accompany the slides for the lecture on the lymphatic system. So let's begin. So in this slide, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the connection between the immune system and the lymphatic system. We're going to talk about the functions of the lymphatic system, and then we're going to finish off with a brief discussion on various organs of the lymphatic system and how lymphocytes develop. So when we look at the lymphatic and the immune system, what we can say is that they're very interconnected to each other, that the two systems are virtually indistinguishable. So when we talked about the immune system, we talk about these cells and the organs that destroy and neutralize pathogens that come into the body. And these pathogens may cause disease or death. Whereas the lymphatic system is a parallel circulatory, almost a parallel circulatory system that collects excess fluids and delivers them to blood and filters pathogen from the blood. So the lymph is the fluid that flows within the lymphatic system, and it's derived from blood and tissue fluid. So when we look at the functions of the immune system, you can see that there are a few different functions. So the first one is it returns excess body fluids back to the bloodstream. So when we talk about movement of body fluids, you know that in the capillary bed, in the arterial end, you've got a net movement of fluid out of the capillaries into the interstitial space. And then in the venular end, you've got the movement of most, not all, most of the fluid returning back into the capillary bed. So I said most, but not all, because out of the 20 liters a day of plasma that's filtered into the interstitial space, 17 liters, so large, but not all of it, so 85% is reabsorbed back through this process, and the other 15% returns to the cardiovascular circulation as lymph via the lymphatic system. Right? So that's one of the main purposes of the lymphatic system. The next purpose of the lymphatic system is to transport lipids, large proteins, fat-soluble vitamins that have been digested and absorbed in the small intestine largely, and they transport it from the small intestine into the rest of the circulation, right? And this dietary lipids, large proteins, and fat-soluble vitamins actually are absorbed through these type of the lymphatic system called the lacteals in the small intestine, and then they basically transport it from the gut. The lymphatic system also transports cells of the immune system, and they contain lymph nodes. You can see over here lymph nodes, which function as major staging areas for the development of critical immune systems. So we're going to go through all that in the next few slides. When we look at the lymphatic system, what we can see is that the lymphatic system is a one-way system. Right? So you know how the cardiovascular, the blood circulatory system pumps blood from the heart to the lungs or the body tissues and then back to the heart. The lymphatic system is not a two-way flow. It's a one-way flow. So you can see over in the previous slide, one of the ways that dietary lipids, large proteins, and vitamins enter into the gut is through these lacteals, and you can see they're only one way, right? There's not this capillary bed that you can see with the arterial end of the capillary bed and the venular end of the capillary bed. In terms of the lymphatic system, it's one-way flow. So what you have is that the excess fluid, or in the case of absorbed nutrients, enter in through the lacteals or the lymphatic capillaries. Then similar to the blood vessel system, the fluid is collected into increasingly larger lymphatic vessels, and it travels through a series of lymphatic nodes, lymph nodes in the groin, armpits, neck, chest, and abdomen. And then what happens is the lymphatic fluid is emptied into the bloodstream by a series of lymphatic ducts at the jugular or subclavian joints. So what you can see over here is you can see there that the lymphatic vessels runs in places where capillary beds are found. And what you can see is excess fluid from the interstitial space over here can enter into the lymphatic capillaries over here. And then the lymphatic fluid, the lymph, is transported into larger and larger lymphatic vessels, right? So similarities between lymph and interstitial fluid is that both are clear, watery, extracellular fluid, extracellular because they're not found in cells, which resemble plasma, blood plasma in composition. The difference is that lymph is found in lymphatic vessels, whereas interstitial fluid is found outside of the cells, and lymph contains higher protein levels as well as higher fat levels when it's transported from the digestive tract, right? Whereas interstitial fluid has lower protein levels than the lymph. Lymphatic capillaries are terminal lymphatics, so they're one-way flow. So you can see over here, this is a, it starts over here, right? So what happens is then the blind ending has got overlapping cells to allow interstitial fluid to flow into them. So you can see over here, they've got overlapping cells. And so the excess fluid from the interstitial space can enter in through those flaps, right? Through those overlapping cells. And it helps between the flaps and the collagen fibers, it helps to keep the fluid once it enters into the lymphatic capillaries in the lymphatic capillaries. These also contain one-way valves to actually encourage fluid to enter into the lymphatic terminal capillaries and not go back out, right? So they prevent backflow and they keep the lymph moving towards the heart, right? So you've got these terminal capillaries, and then you've got the lacteals in the small intestine. In terms of where lymph drains to, once it enters in through the terminal capillaries, what happens is that it's collected into larger and larger lymphatic vessels. And what you can see over here is that the drainage of lymphatic fluid from different parts of the body is not symmetrical. So it's asymmetrical. So what you can see here is lymph fluid or the lymphatic system in the upper right quarter of the body empties into the right lymphatic duct into the right subclavian vein, where it enters into the blood circulatory system, whereas from the other 3/4 of the body, it drains into the thoracic duct, which then empties into the left subclavian vein. So you can see over here, right over here, how it drains into the left subclavian vein from the thoracic duct. And then in the right subclavian vein, it drains from the right lymphatic duct. Lymphokinesis is the movement of lymph towards the heart. And the lymph moves towards the heart with the help of these one-way valves, which are similar to valves in veins, as well as the two pumps that help to move venous blood back towards the heart, right? And then the entrance of lymph into the lymphatic system vary depending on the general physical activity of the person, the pressure of the interstitial pressure, the pressure of the interstitial fluid, the rate and depth of respiration, because that helps with a respiratory pump, whereas generalized physical activity helps with a skeletal muscle pump. Right? So postural changes also help with the skeletal muscle pump. And also we can actually help lymphokinesis in a process called lymphatic drainage through passive compression or massage of the body's soft tissues. So just in case you've forgotten, you've got the respiratory pump over here and the skeletal muscle pump. So these are the same two pumps that help to move venous blood back into the heart. Same exact pumps also helps to move lymph back towards the heart, where it can be drained into the circulatory system, right, through the right and the left subclavian veins. The next part is the lymphoid organs and the lymphocyte developments. So lymphocyte includes T cells, B cells, plasma cells, and natural killer cells. As you can see over here, lymphoid organs include the primary lymphoid organs where B and T cells are developed, and then the secondary lymphoid organs where B and T cells and natural killer cells mount their immune response from. So primary lymphoid organs include bone marrow, where B cells develop, and thymus, where T cells develop. And then the secondary lymphoid organs include lymph nodes, spleen, and tonsils, where lymphocytes actually are located to mount their immune responses from. So the first primary lymphoid organ is the thymus, where T cells develop. So what you can see here is it's got an outer cortex and an inner medulla. The outer cortex is densely packed with thymocytes, so T cells and phagocytes, macrophages and dendritic cells. And the inner part, the medulla, is not as densely packed, and it's the point of departure for thymocytes to leave. So basically what happens is the thymocytes over here, and as they move into the inner medulla portion, you can see that's where the blood vessels are. So this is where they leave the thymus, right? So they develop in the outer cortex region, and then they leave the thymus from the inner medulla region. The tonsils are a secondary lymphoid organs. We all know where the tonsils are, right? Right in the back of the throat. And what happens is it's located specifically along the pharynx so that it can actually interact with pathogens from outside of the body, from the environment, that enters into the body through the respiratory tract, through the air we breathe in, or through the food and drink that we swallow, right? So that tonsils act as secondary lymphoid organs. It has lymphocytes there to be ready to mount on an attack if pathogens enter, right? Location is important because pathogens that enter via the respiratory and digestive tract can penetrate the tissues at the tonsils so that it can be eliminated by the lymphoid follicles there, right? Sometimes what happens is our tonsils can be chronically inflamed in a process called tonsillitis. And so children with chronic or recurring throat infection, the tonsils may swell so much that it can interfere with breathing or swallowing. And then sometimes what happens is that tonsils need to be removed in order for the child to breathe and swallow easily. Another secondary organ, lymphoid organ, are the lymph node. So we've got lymph node throughout our body. And what happens over here is that the lymph nodes on the outer part have got lymphocytes that surround a less dense germinal center. And so what happens is that you've got entry into the lymph node are through these afferent lymphatic vessels. So lymph enters in through the lymph node through the afferent lymphatic vessels and leave it through the efferent lymphatic vessels. Once the lymph fluid enters into the lymph node, what happens is there might be dendritic cells and fixed macrophages here inside the lymph node to destroy whatever pathogens or debris actually enter into the lymph node. So we know that there's an infection if the lymph node swells because the pathogens, the phagocytes, are overwhelmed by the number of pathogens entering into the nodes. So that's a sign, an easy sign of infection there. The spleen is another secondary lymphoid organ. So it's fairly fragile. The spleen is often depicted as being dark red because it's got a lot of blood vessels going in and out of it. The spleen acts to filter blood as well as be a reservoir, a reserve of blood. And so what you have is you have the white pulp surrounding a central arteriole right over here. And the white pulp is where the adaptive immune responses are mounted. And so you've got B and T cells right over here, ready to encounter any pathogen to mount the adaptive immune response. The red pulp is found on the outside and it filters blood. So these also, like the other secondary lymphoid organs, contain fixed macrophages and dendritic cells that help to that acts as phagocytes, right? To remove microbes and other materials and debris from the blood. It also helps to break down dying red blood cells, older dying red blood cells, and platelets. And then the last slide is the mucosal immune response. So mucosal tissues are found where at entry points where it interacts with the external environment. And so what happens is the mucosal tissues are major barriers to pathogens entering into the body. So you can see over here, there's mucosal associated lymphatic tissue, lymphoid tissue or MALT, found in the mucosa of the gastrointestinal tract, in the digestive tract, in breast tissue, in lungs, in eyes, and in the small intestine, right? Also found associated with the bronchioles or the bronchi associated with the respiratory tract. And together with the tonsils, the bronchiole-associated lymphatic tissue are effective against any pathogens that are breathed in. We also have neutralizing antibodies in the mucosa as part of the mucosal immune system. And so what happens is with vaccines, for example, the flu vaccine enhances the IgA production in the mucosal immune system. So IgA antibodies and mucosal secretion binds to a specific pathogen. That pathogen is neutralized when it's coated with antibodies. The pathogen then can't bind to receptors on the cells, and so the pathogen is inactivated. So the killing or the toxic effects of the pathogen is destroyed by the opsonization or the coating or the neutralization effect of the antibodies. All right, so